Good morning, folks. It's Thursday the 24th of February 2022 and it's time for another SNP Peterhead Mythbuster. In these videos we bust the many myths surrounding Scottish independence, and this video is the final part of a 3-week series in which we are addressing the issue of pensions. In part 1 we began busting the state pensions are under threat myth by showing you that they weren't. In part 2 we showed you how state pensioners will actually be better off in an independent Scotland. So having shown that your state pension is secure and will increase, this week in part 3 we are going to show you how we can finance this and the many other transformative policies we have planned. Now, whenever you hear our Tory chums talking down Scotland, you'd think it was a shambles of a country. Do we, do poor, dependent on subsidies from our benevolent neighbours to the south. Just take a look at celebrity unionist Archie Macpherson here during the first independence referendum.
I'm Archie Macpherson.
Nice to meet you.
And obviously I'm campaigning for the no vote, Better Together. You know, the pensioners system that we have at the moment is backed up by 65 million people. If you get independence, we're down to 5.5 million people.
Right.
So both the state pension
Right.
and the private pensions which people have to take out will have to be funded by that smaller group of people. How are they going to afford this?
Now, Archie is correct when he says that the current UK pension system is backed by 65 million people, and that a Scottish pension system would only be backed by 5.5 million. But what Archie, either deliberately or just through lack of actual knowledge, fails to mention is that the UK pension system has to finance the pensions of all UK pensioners, when the Scottish system would only have to finance Scotland's pensioners. Of course, the Better Together campaign failed to correct him. Pretty desperate and certainly misleading stuff, but sadly it worked. When the referendum was assessed, it was pensioners and those approaching pensionable age that largely voted no thanks. And sadly, our side didn't do enough to refute this false claim. Now, after years of having this line fed to us, it may surprise you to learn that an independent Scotland could be one of the richest per capita nations in the world. One where the proper state pension that our older citizens absolutely deserve is easily affordable. Now we all know about the Gers report, the one that's bandied about each year, which, despite being written about Scotland's finances as part of the UK, is then used to convince us that we're too wee and too poor to be independent. Now, one thing that is true in that report is that as part of the United Kingdom, Scotland doesn't raise enough in taxes to cover the expenditure of both her governments, UK and Scottish. The story, as told from the last COVID-free year, is that £66.15 billion was raised in taxes in Scotland. This goes off to the UK Treasury. ScotGov gets £36 billion back for devolved areas. UK Gov spends remaining £30 billion in and for the benefit of Scotland. But that's not quite enough, so UK Gov then spends an additional £15.86 billion, calling that Scotland's deficit. But that's not quite the full truth. Because what's never mentioned in that conversation is national insurance. Now, the UK as a whole raised £111.6 billion in national insurance in 2021. Scotland raised £11.5 billion of that in the same year. It's worthy of note that that's 10.3% of the National Insurance Fund, coming from just 8.4% of the population. With £11.5 billion in national insurance contributions collected and an annual cost of £8.5 billion for Scottish pensions, we can absolutely afford them at the current level, with £3 billion left over for other benefits. But how can we afford to double it so we're at least keeping up with the rest of the developed world? Because even taking off that £11.5 billion, we still appear to come up short. But some of us know better. Last year, Norway and the United Kingdom produced a similar amount of oil. sold on the same international markets for the same international prices to the same international customers. UK oil sales were worth $43.3 billion. Norway fared slightly better at $45.8 billion. But look at this. The difference between oil revenues collected in the United Kingdom and Norway. How could this be anything other than absolute criminal mismanagement of this precious resource and a missed opportunity to fill up your nation's bank account? Keep in mind that 96% of this stuff is in Scottish waters, and once Scotland is calling the shots, we'll get that pitiful figure up closer to Norway's. Let's have a look and see how a similar figure could affect Scotland's deficit. Oh look, we're out of the red and into the black immediately. Of course, this more prudent approach to energy and connected finance was revealed recently when the second round of Scottish wind leases were sold. The headline figure of 700 millions was initially criticised, but the devil was in the detail, because for every gigawatt of energy generated, the companies have to spend £1 billion in the Scottish supply chain. Even within the confines of devolution, we still managed to get a better deal for our wind than the UK ever got for our oil. And if there's one thing true about Scotland, it will always have wind. Currently, 12 gigawatts of capacity and growing. But the biggest increase in revenue to the Scottish Treasury won't be because of our oil or because of our wind, it will be because of our citizens' daily spending. I had a wee look at my bank statement, and guess what? Almost every company I pay is an English headquartered company. Tesco, Asda, Morrison's, my mortgage, internet, mobile phones, Sky Television, car insurance, the list goes on and on. And if, like me, you use these companies, because let's face it, it's almost impossible not to, then your locally earned, locally spent pounds actually contribute to making Scotland look poorer than it really is. But when those companies have to pay Scottish taxes to a Scottish treasury to operate in an independent Scotland, the whole picture changes. As an example, mobile phone firm O2 paid £639 million in UK taxes last year. The Scottish 8.4% of that is £54 million. Now that's just one company, and assuming we keep taxing them at the same rate. And that's also before we start taxing Facebook and Twitter and Amazon and Google, etc. at a proper rate. That's also before we start selling the oil, gas and water to RUK that we currently pool and share. These are just a few of the transformative changes we can make to our national finances following independence, meaning we could easily afford to increase our state pensions to the OECD average. Our pensioners deserve a proper pension, one that will allow them to see out their days under a safe blanket of financial security so that they can enjoy the freedom and comfort that security provides. Even if we changed nothing, an independent Scotland could provide the state pension at its current level. But only an independent Scotland can afford to, has the political will to increase the state pension to at least the OECD average. Now, I'm sure the finance for this is probably available within the United Kingdom too, but the political will is missing. Folks, the long-hidden Macron report said an independent Scotland would suffer from the embarrassment of riches. And looking at this, that potential is still there. So folks, after independence, your pension secure at its current level, and the finance will be there to fund an increase to the OECD average. All you've got to do is give the SNP-led Scottish Government the powers of independence to enact this, and the many other transformative changes that we have planned for our amazing wee nation. Folks, thanks for watching this video. Please feel free to share it with anyone you like, especially any sceptical pensioners that you might know. Cheers.